dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Working class heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here tonight on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a State of the Union address it was. I gotta be honest, I did not stay awake for the whole thing. It was kind of an insomniac's dream. I mean, it was boring on so many fronts. The only thing that kept me awake was the loud clapping by Donald Trump. It was like he was clapping right on the microphone. It was that loud. But here's the thing. He cannot be thrilled today. Poor ratings, poor showing, poor energy. Didn't quite get the guy's writing style, evidently. A lot of points where you rolled through the punchline, stopped before the punchline. It was not a well-delivered speech. And it was a long speech, third longest speech in the history of the State of the Union speeches. Third longest. And to be honest, I was happy just to go to sleep. I woke up in the morning, read the rest of it, and found out, to be honest, it was no better than the first half of the speech. Now, ratings down. Evidently, according to Variety, they say about 45.6 million people tuned in, compared to the 48 million that tuned in to Obama's first State of the Union. Now, you go, that's got to be driving Trump just nuts, because he's absolutely got to beat Obama in everything. And there was no Sean Spicer, there was no Scaramucci, there was nobody to say it was the best, biggest ever. We had the largest crowd ever. That wasn't there. Now, the number is pretty simple. Nielsen points out that Variety points out that 7 million people watched on NBC, 7 million on CBS, about 5.4 on ABC, 3.6 million on Fox. Fox News had 11.5 million tune in, CNN 3.1, MSNBC less. Telemundo had 1.4 million people tune in. It was the social media event of the day yesterday. Twitter taking the majority of the activity, 52%, 41% on Facebook, 7% on Instagram. So there you go. There was that. Now, interestingly enough, and I love the USA Today headline. It was one of those things that kind of made you laugh. It was just better than mediocre, was the headline. Just north of mediocre. Most of the people who viewed the speech walked away and they said, yeah, they approved. 75% said, yeah, they approved of what was in the speech. And look, okay, here's my problem with the speech. The speech was okay. To be honest, if you read it, and I did, you go, okay, there's some stuff in here that you can work with. Question is will you? I mean, you go down the list of, all of the things that need to get done. And yet here we are, nothing. And you go through some of the fact-checking stuff. And fact checkers, to be honest, had to be losing their minds. Because virtually everything that came out of his mouth, at one point or another, he's contradicted and then contradicted again. He's been on all sides of every issue and then on no side of any issue. It's really twisted and bizarre, but he kept going on as he's done. You know, we've enacted the biggest tax cuts and reforms in American history, because everything he does is the biggest and the best and the greatest, right? Well, according to PolitiFact, it's only the fourth largest tax cut since 1940, and according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, it's the eighth largest since 1918. Question is, again, come back to who did it benefit? Certainly not going to be benefiting you or me in the long term. We're going to give $1.7 trillion away over the next decade that could have been spent much better, you know, like on infrastructure. The biggest tax cut, in case you wanted to know, in history was 1981, Ronald Reagan, which ended up causing the Great Reagan Recession. So are we on that path? I'm arguing already. Mark your calendars. It's coming. Now, Trump, of course, took credit for, you know, just the most amazing job growth ever, except he took 2 months that were part of Obama's, or actually, yeah, it took 2 months that were part of Obama's term. If you go in the 2017, he only created 2 million jobs. That's lower than the 2.2 during Obama's term. And look, you know, I'm not going to bicker about that, because understand, you know, what Trump has is he's riding the coattail of the Obama economy. All of the policies there, he's riding that wave. He goes on, and it had to come out. He threw out we passed tax cuts, and roughly 3 million workers have already gotten tax cut bonuses. Many of them thousands and thousands of dollars per worker, and it's getting more every month, every week. I got to be honest, I haven't heard of anyone getting more than 1,000. And when you look at the details, a lot of it's prorated. We talked about Home Depot yesterday. Most of the people are going to be in the 250, 300 range. If you're there 20 plus years, then you get the 1,000. But that's a one-time thing. And I know that you had the former founder and the former CEO of Home Depot saying, Democrats got to use their stupid brains. This is real money in people's pockets, and I get that. But this isn't going to make people's lives long-term better. This is going to be a one-time, here you go. This isn't a raise. This is here's a check. And the other part of it is, how many of these companies were giving these bonuses anyway? Nobody really has asked that question. How many of these companies had given them in the past, and only now we're paying attention to their press release? Because, hey, it's politically expedient. It helps the message. He goes on to talk about the jobs, and this is one of those moments where I'm reading through this and I'm just going, you got to be kidding me. He said, quote, Apple has just announced plans to invest a total of $350 billion in America and hire another 20,000 workers. Look, I'm probably not the brightest guy in the bulb, probably not the smartest mathematician, but I'll be honest with you, for 20,000 jobs, $350 billion. How about we just don't create the jobs and divvy up the money? Because that is a lifetime worth of wages, if that's accurate. Now, here's the problem. That is not accurate. That 350 billion number that they've just pulled out of who knows where, that's what they've brought. That's what they're bringing back. The assumption is that they're going to spend that money here. The assumption is that when they repatriate at a much lower tax rate, they're going to have a couple $100 billion that they didn't have to pay tax on, that we can't use that revenue to build roads and bridges and everything else, that they're going to then use that money here. And I would argue we don't know that. We don't know that they're going to take, look, because I can't find a word from Apple saying, hey, we're going to get this huge, massive windfall and we're going to invest all $350 billion here. I would argue a lot of stock buybacks, a lot of enriching the CEOs, and lots of Chinese investment. That's happening. But I don't actually see where they're saying, hey, we're going to invest all of it right here, right now. That's just us wishing and hoping. Or that's Donald Trump wishing and hoping, taking credit for something that's probably not going to happen. And he does a lot of that. He takes a lot of credit for stuff that he didn't have anything to do with, and a lot of stuff that's never going to happen. I'll give you an example. One of the things he took credit for is the black and Hispanic unemployment rates. If you look at during the Obama terms, from 2010 to 2017, black unemployment, for instance, went down from 16.5% all the way down to 7.8%. You're talking about more than a 50% cut. Now, understand, it has gone down a little bit more as the economy has tightened. But Donald Trump didn't do that. Also, Hispanic unemployment had been cut by more than half, was almost 13% in January of 2010, down in 2017 to 5.9. Again, before Trump took office, had nothing to do with him. We were already on this slide downward. The unemployment rate was being cut. And understand, the unemployment rate across the country is right now, what, about 3.5%, they're saying? So get ready for the Federal Reserve to start slamming on the brakes and raising interest rates. Because, hey, we don't want wage increases. And it was announced today that I think it went up, 2.6% last year, 2017, which is a good increase. It's better than it's been in a couple of years. But again, I would argue it's the result of a growing economy, a steadily growing economy during the Obama years. Look, I think Obama could have done much more. I think we could have gotten down the road much further. But at the end of the day, this has nothing to do with Trump. It just seems to me to be that simple. And then a couple other things that jumped out at me. He in the State of the Union, he touted the end of the individual mandate. We've destroyed that, but didn't bother to ask for a repeal. So he knows what he's done is enough to make it collapse and destroy it. This way he can say, look what we did. We repealed the individual mandate, while still having things in place, and the prices are just going to go rocket out of control because they've caused so much chaos. I look at what's happened this year. Premiums just out of control. The thing that bothers me, he only mentioned the word steel once during the entire, oh my God, hour and a half, 3 years, a lifetime, however long it was. Mentioned steel once, and it wasn't about saving steel jobs. He talked about trade a little bit, said our nation has lost its wealth, but we are getting it back so fast, he said. The era of economic surrender is totally over. From now on, we expect trading relationships to be fair and very importantly, reciprocal. Only problem is our trade deficits are actually getting larger. It was larger last year than it was the year before. This year is going to be larger even still, and yet they've done nothing. I mean, lots of lip service, lots of ticking people off, but not anything really getting done. We don't seem to be anywhere down the road. He goes on to say, we will work to fix bad trade deals and negotiate new ones, not holding the breath simply because he's done nothing. There has been nothing done to this point. And if you remember, we talked about it yesterday and last week, that while in Davos, he said, hey, I'm open to the TPP. So you got to wonder. You got to wonder there. Also, the big, beautiful coal. You got to love beautiful, clean coal. And he said, we've ended the war on American energy. We've ended the war on beautiful, clean coal. Again, coal is the dirtiest source of energy that we have. Also, Obama didn't kill coal. Regulation didn't kill coal. Natural gas killed coal. And automation and mountaintop removal killed the coal jobs. So it seems pretty simple to me to put it all in. But all in all, it made me pine for George W. Bush's State of the Unions. Much shorter, to the point, down the road, get out. I'm hoping that the next one isn't this bad and I don't have to sit through another one. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of it? Did you make it the whole speech? That's the question I've been asking people. Did you stay awake for the whole speech, or did you nod out like I did? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Adam Parker-Menko is going to be here to give us his thoughts on the big speech and where we go from here. Right back. Stick around.
Where do you fit in? take a look at yourself. The 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day 7,000 teachers and staff at the Orleans Parish School District in New Orleans, Louisiana, were fired. The public schools were considered some of the worst in the country. The school district was also bankrupt. It was unable to account for $71 million in federal funds. After Hurricane Katrina, the school district lost nearly its entire tax base. The district canceled all pay and health insurance for its teachers and staff. Then, the state of Louisiana seized control of most of the city's 128 schools. A majority were either closed or turned over to charter school operators. The school district fired its remaining teachers and staff. It was a union-busting maneuver against the United Teachers of New Orleans. The union was an AFT affiliate. Organized in 1972, it was the first integrated education union in the South. Its membership overwhelmingly consisted of African American women. After the schools were turned over to the charters, they were replaced by inexperienced Teach for America workers. Many of these new teachers did not have any teacher certification. A class action lawsuit soon followed. In 2014, Louisiana's Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals found that teachers and staff were not given due process and had the right to be rehired as schools reopened after Katrina. The damages could amount to $1.5 billion. 10 years after Katrina, a New York Times article asked the question, was Hurricane Katrina the best thing ever to happen to the education system in New Orleans? As Education Secretary Arne Duncan once said, the answer has been a resounding no. In the years since, the union has fought successfully to organize many of the charter schools in New Orleans. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. The Rick Smith Show.
So like I said, the fact checkers were losing their mind last night. In fact, PolitiFact, the fact-checking website, crashed during the State of the Union address. So many people were going, is that right? Is it what he's saying accurate? And the answer is most of it, no. Most of it was just nice rhetoric, interesting words. But like the last year, over 2,100 lies, about 6 lies a day. The speech was chocked full of it. Anyway, here to come talk a little bit about, share some of his thoughts on the big speech and answer the big question that I've got today. Did you stay awake? Is Adam Parkhomenko. He's a political advisor and a friend of the show. Adam, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on again, Rick. I appreciate it.
So, big question: Did you make it the whole speech?
No, I actually I've sort of lived vicariously through Twitter, and then I went back and looked at a few different pieces of it, but kept an eye on as you mentioned, all of the fact checks that were coming out in real time.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed by it, but we did the show. I started watching it, and about halfway through, I just, you know what, I'm going to sleep. I'll read the rest of it in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much how a lot of us were, and I think that the most successful thing that he accomplished last night was passing the lowest of bars, and he was able to read from the teleprompter.
Which, am I the only one who remembers, the 6, 7, 8 years there was a black guy in the White House who used to use a teleprompter that the Marmalade Mussolini used to beat up on?
It's amazing. It's pretty much like every single thing that Trump has said over the years and tweeted, and it either was totally inaccurate when we're talking about birth certificates, or it ultimately came true when he was in the White House.
So what grabbed you last night? Was there anything that you said, this is just crazy? Anything? Any? I know, narrowing it down to one, but what was it?
I think putting all of the lies aside, I think one thing that is interesting was some of the reporting coming out of South Korea, where CNN has a correspondent base right now, in regards to what is looking like a show of force from North Korea 2 weeks from now. And while they didn't have an official response from North Korea, I think some of these remarks that Trump has been making to kind of stir the pot really is putting people, not just in this country and in the national security realm on edge, but also, throughout that region. People really do think that there's going to be some type of force used, and they're starting to think that it's imminent based on, his remarks.
Well, and the remarks that worried me were the ones from his private luncheon before the State of the Union, that he was saying, we need the only thing that brings a country together is a major event. I start seeing that, and I start, uh-oh.
Yep, and then, this Nunez memo where, Trump is on his way out of the door, and his members saying, we got to get this thing released, and Trump says that he is releasing while, it's masqueraded by these statements of Nunez saying, oh, it's with the White House. It's now, Trump's got 5 days to make a decision that's already been made, but, they're trying to let us all sit here and think that, it's under careful consideration. And, prior to jumping on this show with you, there's been 2 huge pieces of news that are breaking right now, one of which is Howard Feynman came out and said again tonight that Trump wants to have Mueller go before a grand jury. So that's something that, when you're filing it under the obstruction, I mean, it's just unbelievable. I think that, conventional wisdom recently was that, Trump at some point might be forced to resign or impeached. I really do believe that, the most likely scenario for Trump is prison time. And the other news that has broken tonight is that Hope Hicks, on a conference call, referring to the emails relating to the Trump Tower June 9th, 2016 meeting, stated that we need to make sure that these emails never make it out. So some big news tonight with Hope Hicks, and more news on Trump wanting to put the special counsel, who is a Republican and former director of the FBI, before a grand jury himself.
So that's an interesting way to try and discredit the person who's investigating you. You try them and throw them in jail first.
Every single thing they have thrown here has just completely fallen apart. I mean, Trump asking soon to be now, I guess he hasn't quite retired yet, but Deputy Director Andy McCabe, who he voted for, and he stated he didn't vote in the general election. And then CNN comes out and reports that Andy McCabe did not vote in the general election, but he did vote in the 2016 Republican primary. So it's the first time he's ever on record as voting as a Republican in that cycle. And, now Trump is turning towards Rosenstein. The most common piece here of all of it, though, is they're all Republicans. Jim Comey was a Republican. Rosenstein is a Republican. Mueller is a Republican. McCabe is a Republican. If you look back the last time that we had something similar to a special counsel, I think the last time I was on your show, we were sort of joking we should, bring back Ken Starr. I mean, you could bring back Ken Starr now just for the Stormy Daniels piece of all of this. That's not even anything close to everything else that we're talking about, which is the Trump-Russia piece. So it's absolutely incredible. I think that, what I find very fascinating is that Mueller, or the special counsel team, shared with the Trump attorneys that, one of the areas they wanted to focus on the questioning with Trump was around obstruction. And, I actually think that it's well beyond that, but you're going to have Trump focused on prepping. Maybe he doesn't do much, but if he does prep for the questioning around obstruction, I think this guy has absolutely no idea what's coming at him. And the amount of information and data that continues to come in, Mark Warner just said the other day that they've received all sorts of, huge new information in all of this. It's not ending anytime soon, but what Trump is doing is continuing to obstruct at every single corner. And the Nunez memo is like, literally, they wrote a memo that they can release, and they ran what is basically a Kremlin active measures campaign calling for themselves to release the memo, and they're putting our national security at risk. And they're putting, if this memo comes out, our intelligence community and the Department of Justice in a position where the only way to explain why this memo is inaccurate is by ruining methods that our intelligence community uses to gather this and burning sources. And the only winner there is Putin.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing to me, but not surprising, to be honest. You know, I've always said that Republicans are scorched earthers. You know, they want what they want, and if they don't get it, they'll burn it down.
Right. No, I mean, everything about this at every single corner, they are in control of, everything right now. And not only are they in control of everything, but you have Republicans that are the ones that are heading this up. And I think that you've got Republicans that are true patriots and Americans and that care about their country and are doing the jobs that they stepped up to do. And those are people like Rosenstein, Mueller. I know McCabe's on his way out there, but I kind of said the other day with FBI Director Wray, when he threatened to resign after he was being pushed by Trump and Sessions to get rid of McCabe, I thought, wow, okay, this guy is doing exactly what he said he would when he testified before the Senate for his confirmation. And then we find out really the political pressure worked on him. And then you've got the White House counsel who threatened to resign after what the New York Times reported just a few days ago was June 2017. Trump wanted to put together a plan to fire Mueller. So, all of this is just at every single turn, it's crumbling. But thankfully, we have people that are in these positions at all levels of government who are civil servants that, took an oath and care about their country and are doing what they do best. And, it was just, I think, a couple of years ago where in the news, we were often talking about issues around the Secret Service and can the Secret Service overcome the issues that they're having? And what's been incredible to me is, you see the Secret Service go out of the news, and the FBI is just being chipped apart piece by piece politically. And, this is an institution that has been the most well-regarded and respected law enforcement entity, not just in our country, but throughout the world.
And what they're doing, and I would argue successfully, because I've had people they're wearing the Blue Lives Matter, stickers and all of that, now turning on the FBI, and you're going, how did that happen?
Yeah, and it's, every little thing that happens, I saw someone tweet today, there's no coincidences anymore, and it's really true. I mean, when you look at the news, Trump calling basically to investigate the Clinton Foundation, and then, within 24 hours, DOJ announces that they are investigating the Clinton Foundation. But instead of going to the FBI office in New York, which seemed to actually truly have serious issues based on the leaks that were coming out and the news that the crumbs that Giuliani was sharing in advance of things, they opened the investigation into the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock, where the library is based, not the foundation, because if you look, the U.S. attorney for the region servicing Little Rock is the former aide to Mike Huckabee.
Wow. You look at how incestuous this pool looks and how, I keep coming back to the word treasonous. And I just can't get that out of my mind. And because there's part of me that goes, Trump is kind of adult. Maybe he didn't know what he was getting into. Maybe he's just an authoritarian type and he wants what he wants. But you start putting all these pieces together and you start seeing, how all the chess moves are moving into place. You can only keep coming back to that treasonous word.
No, I think that is absolutely correct. And you're making me think now of when we had the White House physical over at Walter Reed, right? And the doctor comes out and talks about how, Trump, without saying it, but basically, he was able to identify what an elephant and a camel looked like and, count the hours of a clock and was mentally stable. And what's interesting about that is, my takeaway was, well, there goes that defense, because basically we have a doctor from Walter Reed saying that this individual doesn't have any mental health issues, and if that's the case, he is choosing to act this way.
Yep.
And I think that's what's even scarier.
And it made me think I don't want to go to that doctor, because look, my doctor won't tell me that I'm going to be okay 6 months from now. This guy's saying, 6 years from now, he's going to be great.
Right. I mean, it's it's definitely incredible. I'm glad that he has the goal of losing 10 to 15 pounds this year. I don't think that's going to be difficult with the stress he's under the further that Mueller gets along here. But we, as we've talked about on this show before, not just Democrats or independents, Republicans, but those that are rejecting this. There's a lot of people that did not support Trump in the 2016 presidential. A lot of them have worked their lives electing Republicans. Those individuals that have spent, their careers as Republican operatives who did not support Trump are now looking at people that they worked hard to elect in places like Congress, and they are completely dismayed and done because the people that they helped elect aren't standing up and rejecting this either. And this is not who we are. And so all of those individuals that are stepping up and working together, I mean, we're defenders of the Constitution. And I sort of joke, I was with a couple former Nikki Haley staffers the other day, and I'm like, I can't wait for the day that we get to kind of work against each other again on some of these campaigns, unless, at some point we're just all continually working together, because that's what Trump ultimately does, to bring a majority of this country together.
And, I had said that from the beginning. I mean, on Inauguration Day, I was saying, my prediction is he's going to be the great uniter. The problem is you're going to unite the nation against him because things are going to get so bad. And here we are. I mean, we're right where I thought we would be.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, I think if you look at Putin and Russia and kind of the active measures campaign that came out of the Cold War and has been fine-tuned online, that is, they look at us here in the West as naive Americans. And I think the majority of Americans are not naive. The majority of Americans voted for Hillary Clinton, and you've got more folks that are stepping up and starting to realize, this is totally unacceptable. But at the end of the day, there is that group of people that are just completely naive to what's going on around them. And until it actually hurts them, whether it's in their pocket, whether it's because, they have to sacrifice something in order to try to provide health care to somebody, I don't think that they'll truly understand that. And so earlier in this interview, when you talked about Donald Trump kind of talking about a major incident or something like that uniting folks, I think that that's one of the scariest things of all, is that if he's going to go and try to pull the trigger and do something in order to help his poll numbers and bring people together, and he thinks that's going to overshadow everything, that's the most terrifying thing. And it was said over and over during the campaign, which is, a man you can bait with a tweet is, not someone you can trust with the nuclear codes. And it is devastating. It is scary. And all we can do is continue to fight and do everything we can this year up and down the ballot to win these seats back. And I think, we may have some surprises as well. You and I talked the night of Alabama, where things were kind of looking a little odd, and then all of a sudden, things switched around, and I think that gave a lot of people hope.
Yeah, I'm with you. So let me get your thoughts. I mean, do we foresee him attempting to fire Mueller and Rosenstein? Do we see that happening?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think if you look at the way that this is all happening now, he's starting to kind of take a look at this and think that probably his best bet to try to, stop this or slow it down is Rosenstein. But he's just getting more and more and more paranoid, with each passing minute now, and he's just out of control. I mean, the story, I've always said, when you take all the news that's reported every single day and you overlay that with tweets and you overlay that with the video, and just like 3 examples would be Trump tweeting around 3:40 p.m. on June 9th of 2016 about Hillary and, things coming. And that's, 20 minutes before the Trump Tower meeting takes place with Trump Jr., the team, and Russians. And then you've got Giuliani on TV, and closer towards the election. When you start to overlay that, the picture it's already painted is absolutely incredible. But when you start to overlay that with all of the news starting to come out, it makes more and more sense with each day. And so when you take the news that just came out about the June 2017 effort where Trump tried to fire Mueller right after he was handed the Manafort and Flynn investigations, and then you go back to June and you look at people like April Ryan and others who were talking around June 12th about, word that Trump is trying to get rid of Mueller. It's true. It adds up. And now we know that reporting that came out around June 12th was accurate because we know that the White House counsel threatened to quit because of what Trump was trying to get him to do. So, with each passing minute, hour, day, all of the news that's coming fills in these little gaps. And really, that's just what we have publicly. So just imagine what Mueller is working with right now, and just imagine what Mueller is going to be going in there with. And so to get back to it, I think he's absolutely going to try to get rid of Mueller. He's been trying at least since second week of June. And Rosenstein, who is someone that was put in that position because of Trump, and is overseeing this because Sessions recused himself, is going to be one of the top targets. And so the quicker Mueller can get in there and start that questioning, we all know Trump can't help himself. He can't stop talking. I joked online, the first 2 or 3 questions I would ask Trump just to kind of get a baseline visually would be, what's your height? What's your weight? Who's John Barron? And did you try to fire Mueller?
There you go. No, you're right there. At the end of it, you're spot on. So the last question I've got for you, when that happens, because I, like you, fully expect it to happen. What do you think? What should the response be? I see mobilizing, I see organizing. What do you think the response should be?
I think naturally, it's kind of like the Democratic Party right now. The Democrats are successful all over the country in these special elections. We've flipped 34 seats since January 2017. Republicans have flipped 4 seats. The DNC's got a lot of problems. It's got a lot of work to do. It's not strong. So, there's organizations like the DLCC and others out there that are working really hard. So is the DNC. But naturally, people are stepping up and they're coming out and they're voting. And a lot of these, they're voting in higher numbers than they've ever voted before in presidential elections. And so if Mueller was to be fired or Rosenstein was to be fired, I think what you're going to see is people naturally taking to the streets. And I think you're going to see that all over. And that what ramifications that ultimately has, I'm not sure. In my lifetime, I don't think we've ever, I don't remember ever kind of in my adult life ever witnessing anything like that. But I think it would just be natural where people say, I'm not going to work today. I'm going to start marching.
I hope it's what I've been advocating for, and it's what I hope actually happens. Adam, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing some of your thoughts and some insights. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Always good stuff, Adam Parkhоменко. Again, I fully expect, like we said, I fully expect Trump to pull something. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show. The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show. The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you. And it's going down. Before you come home and tell me that you're not angry, and I'll be leaving.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So, Sarah Huckleberry Sanders was on with Chris Cuomo And Cuomo said, I've never seen Nancy Pelosi so grim-faced. And Sarah Sanders said, well, I think she looks like that all the time. I think she should smile a lot. Smile a lot more. I think the country would be better for it, she said. Seems to kind of embody the bitterness that belongs to the Democratic Party. Actually, to the Democrat Party right now. She goes on to say that Democrats face a big decision. They need to decide, Chris, do they love America or do they hate this president? Those are your two choices. There's nothing in the middle. And you can't love America and hate this president. You just can't do it. Just is what it is. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here.
So do you love America?
On again, off again relationship, the usual stuff. We've had our issues lately, there's some complaints, but no, I love America. I love America.
As we all should, but you see, now you absolutely then have to love the president then.
I mean, moving on.
Moving on. The right answer, the diplomatic answer, good for you, down the middle. So what'd you think of the big speech? Did you make it all the way through?
I did make it all the way through. This was one of the longer State of the Union addresses we've had in recent years. There's a lot of people watching the clock when it was going on, seeing if it was going to hit the Clinton record that Bill Clinton set back when he was delivering his, very Clinton-esque, very detail-filled State of the Union addresses. It fell a little bit short of that, but I was able to make it through it and, watch all of the highs and all of the lows of what was just a very interesting State of Union address, to say the least.
Yeah, I got to be honest. We did the show. We were live during the speech. I went in. I began to watch it, and about halfway through, I just zonked right out. It didn't hold me. I mean, I believed nothing that came out of his mouth. Those obviously somebody else's words that tomorrow or the day after, I'm sure he will have forgotten that he uttered, and will probably take the other side of whatever he took during the speech.
I mean, it's worth noting that after it, a lot of Democrats were saying, well, this was interesting, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if all of us talk about unity and all of us talk about extending a hand to Democrats to try to get something done on immigration will be undone the next day with a tweet. But as of right now, we have not really seen the president take to Twitter as often as he usually does. He has been relatively quiet in the past couple of days. So he may have understood that this is the period of time where he could actually get a pretty solid news day. He can win over some of the, never Trumpers who occupy a disproportionate amount of the media landscape and, sort of win the day on that round. But if you have any understanding of Trump, that's just not going to be the case forever. Every time we see Trump come out and, be presidential and do sort of a quasi pivot, that never really lasts very long. There's a long list of times that has happened, from him giving his first, foreign policy speech on the campaign and then directly attacking Ted Cruz's wife, him giving a relatively well-received speech at the RNC, or at the Republican National Convention, and then following that up by going after Gold Star families. So he is enjoying this moment right now, but I'm not convinced that anything's really changed.
No, I'm with you, and I agree with Nancy Pelosi. Let him don't do anything stupid. Let him be his slobbering self, which I thought was funny.
I mean, and that was interesting. Despite the fact that Democrats were, well behaved during this, there were a lot of Republicans afterwards who basically accused those in the other party of not showing respect, saying, how dare you show this level of disrespect to somebody simply because they have a different political opinion than you? This, of course, being remarks directed towards Donald Trump, who, needless to say, is obviously heavily respectful of anybody, regardless of their beliefs or gender or religion or politics or body shape or, physical or mental disabilities. He just is a kind, accepting soul.
Yeah, there is that.
Because I love America.
Here's the weird thing, though, and it's one of those. This is from the party of the guy. There was a guy who screamed out during an Obama State of the Union, "You lie." This is a party that obstructed that president at every opportunity, and not just in a political way, but in a mean-spirited. I mean, you look at the years Trump was, going after the birther stuff, the years he was, railing on him for using a teleprompter. I mean, there was nothing that guy could do right. And now it's interesting to see that dynamic shift to where now Republicans are pointing the finger going, what's wrong with them for not supporting our guy?
No, exactly. And even the rank and file Republicans who are, not necessarily bosom buddies with Trump, they were responsible for this level of discourse being lowered. The mainstream of the party really embraced a lot of the Tea Party aspects, which frankly were pretty mean-spirited if you saw a lot of those signs. Before all of that, Mitch McConnell, right before the inauguration, met with his colleagues at a steakhouse in D.C. and said that their primary goal was to undermine the Obama presidency, make this a one-term president. And, that is just sort of the status quo for quite some time. And, the fact now that they're wiping their hands on that and trying to pretend that they did not, actively participate in paving the road for somebody like Donald Trump is just laughable in its face.
Now, and then you had the titular head of the Republican Party, Rush Limbaugh, saying, I hope he fails, talking about Obama. And you go, I remember that stuff too. Now, look, I don't want Trump to fail because then we all suffer. The problem is all of his ideas seem to be all over the map, and there's no real direction here. I mean, we're just chaotic and on one side very chaotic and unstructured, but on another, there's some laser focused stuff going on that we aren't talking about, that nobody knows about, that's deregulating industry after industry that I think is going to harm workers, going to harm consumers, and going to harm we the people, we the citizens.
Which was by design. If you listen to Steve Bannon back when he was in better graces with the White House, he appeared at CPAC and said a lot of this, a lot of these things where it looks like we are dismantling the American state, is actually intended to be that, saying that they were trying to, take apart the country and take apart the regulatory establishment by some of the cabinet picks that they put out there. And that has, shown to be true time and time again, be it through the EPA or be it with Jeff Sessions, who, despite being in a party and in a country that's increasingly open to, marijuana or just a lot of other social issues, has nevertheless decided to bring the country backwards on that front. And it just really raises the fact that, this is an interesting time, and one that is an administration that is, all over the place, but also doing some things very right in terms of the goals that they are trying to achieve.
Yeah. And again, last night, beautiful coal. We love coal. Loving the coal.
Yeah. Joe Manchin was speaking to reporters afterwards, and he singled that part specifically, saying there's a lot of parts in the speech that he found good as somebody who represented West Virginia, citing the coal remarks in particular. And that again is just a whole nother story, but that just speaks volumes about the, interesting reactions we've seen to the deregulatory efforts of this administration.
Yeah, beautiful and clean, wonderfully clean. Let's move on. The big memo. I understand the memo, the Nunes memo, is supposed to be very shortly going to be released so that the rest of us can see it. I understand the FBI today has warned, against its release.
This was interesting. There was a very rare public statement coming out from the FBI saying that they had some serious concerns, grave concerns, I believe was the word that they used, over some of the factual elements of this, saying that, obviously context was removed and that this could leave the wrong impression, and basically cautioning against its release. Devin Nunes shot back saying, basically, of course, you guys would not want this to be released. This is my master plan against you, in so many words. And as it stands right now, the White House is giving sort of a dual message on this. On one hand, they're trying to say, we're going to review it. We'll look at this over a couple of days. But then last night you had Trump caught on a hot mic telling a lawmaker that they were 100% going to release it. And you had Chief of Staff John Kelly as well, saying that this was going to be something that was going to be released, despite the fact that there were, high-level members of the Justice Department and the FBI who spoke with him and made a personal appeal to try to get the White House to move away from this.
It's interesting, and I understand the Washington Post today had an article or had a full page ad from the Congressional Research Institute on transparency, and maybe transparency not being the best thing in the interest of we the people. And I go, I want to see the memo. In fact, I want to see the Democratic memo. In fact, I want to see the information that came up, that became the memos.
Yeah, I mean, the raw intelligence is basically the underlying factor here. You know, you can pretty much take what Americans can't see and manipulate that to have it say whatever you want. And, you know, the fact that they're moving forward with this and willing to make these huge brazen claims that have national security implications, such as the FBI is lying and is trying to, you know, spy on hardworking Americans and whatnot, like Carter Page, without actually giving, you know, context to that, just doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's scary stuff. And again, you know, you go back to and looking at what this administration has done from the beginning. It's all about destabilizing institutions. If it's not our media, it's justice. It's the FBI. It's right down the, anyone who questions this administration has to be destroyed.
I mean, it's weird. You know, it's a law and order presidency, but suddenly the FBI is part of the swamp. I'm not necessarily sure how they're working, how they're pulling that one off, but they've seemed to be pretty successful considering some of the, you know, crazy Twitter eggs that have been yelling at me.
Yeah, I actually asked a friend just today, you know, Blue Lives Matter, yes, but not the FBI.
Right.
Because, you know, he's got the, you know, he was a big Blue Lives Matter. I'm going, but now the FBI, not so much?
I mean, it's fascinating. There is this belief that the, you know, White House has trumpeted saying that I guess FBI agents shouldn't be allowed to have opinions. And then also trying, you know, earlier in the administration saying that members of the FBI were calling up the White House press office and getting in touch with Sarah Sanders to tell them how pleased they were with Comey being fired. And then, of course, Trump, you know, speaking before law enforcement officers and trying to elicit applause from some very bombastic, you know, policy proposals he's put out. So there's just a lot of confusion over what exactly they are expecting from law enforcement officers.
Yeah, and finally, are you following this Stormy Daniels thing? I mean, at this point, I'm almost to the point where I don't really care. All I know is I'm being told by Trump's lawyer that, you know, they gave 130 grand to somebody, right?
I mean, that is what people have. Sorry, that's what the Wall Street Journal at least has largely been able to conclude based on some of the reporting, some of the files that have been, some of the reportings that have been filed in Delaware. And then last night on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Stormy Daniels just made this all that much more weirder by refusing to give some definitive answers on this, and in a large part confirming that she may have signed an NDA. You know, Kimmel put out, you know, the proposition that if you did not sign a non-disclosure agreement, you could deny it, right? And then she sort of waffled on that and then said that he was very smart and just playing coy over this entire thing. And then raising doubt over this new letter that was apparently from her publicist and confirmed by her attorneys that flat out denied that an affair took place, that she declined to know the origins of, which again just raised some additional questions. And then apparently, you know, her backing away from a scheduled appearance on The View, which just raises more questions over what is going on behind the scenes and, you know, how this is being played. It's just mind-boggling and, you know, just a interesting story, and not just because it involves a porn star. Although,
yeah, another episode of As the White House Turns.
I mean, this show has really jumped the shark. You know, it was interesting when it was kind of a parody back in the, you know, campaign days and stuff, and when you had, you know, that weird, interesting protagonist. But now a lot of the plot lines are just stretching any kind of belief.
Yeah, I saw she was on Kimmel, and I'm going, why? You know, really, why? I actually don't care, because here's the thing. Do I think he was you know, fooling around with a porn star? Absolutely. In fact, I'm sure at one point during his time during the Stern years, he'd admitted to doing something, you know, just as bad. I mean, if here's a guy who had said if his daughter wasn't his daughter, he'd be dating her. If you know, that's, to me, that's the depth. You know, messing around with a porn star, that's just way above. If my daughter weren't my daughter, I'd be nailing her.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, rooted in all of this is this basically is an element that makes evangelicals look hypocritical, makes the Republican Party look hypocritical. But this isn't the first time we've seen evidence of that. You know, it's worth noting that a lot of Republicans are still very eagerly following the Hastert rule, despite the fact that that's named after somebody who I don't believe necessarily fulfills family values. And, you know, that this is just a party that has not necessarily been the moral standard bearer by any stretch of the imagination, especially in the past couple of years.
Well, you know, at least they didn't elect an alleged pedophile. I mean, at least.
Well, I mean, and that's that is probably more to the credit of black women in Alabama than, you know, Republicans coming to their senses. But
good point.
Take away what you can, I guess.
Justin, I appreciate the time. Good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show for working people. Good talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain, to earn your pay for centuries on past, for no more than your bread, have bled for your countries and counted your days.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, you remember talking about the solar tariffs? We talked about that for a couple of days. And look, my position on it was pretty simple. It's either the most halfway solution to a problem that he could come up with, or it's to destroy solar completely, because you didn't do anything to help manufacturing grow, and you've made the cost of panels go up, which is going to harm the installers. So you're going to see job losses there without the domestic production that a tariff would help to do. And I said for a while, what you need to have is a long-term strategy, and tariffs being part of that. If we're going to build and manufacture the panels, we should be installing them as well, and we should have a government policy that says, hey, we want to do that. That's not what's going on. In fact, you look at right now the report out of the Department of Energy, evidently their renewable energy and energy efficiency programs are being slashed by 72% in fiscal 2019. And you go, what's the point of that? Well, a couple of reasons. We love coal. It's about burn, baby, burn. It's about the fossil fuels. It's about, well, paying the big oil companies, the big coal barons, and of course getting rid of that hippie liberal renewable stuff. But a 72% cut. And you go, again, is it that they're incompetent? Is it that they're just plain stupid? Or are they laser focused on destroying, well, a future without fossil fuels? Look, I've got solar panels on my house. I think they're fantastic. I think everyone should. I think they should be on every mall and on every school and every bus stop and every billboard. But we don't have that kind of policy in this country. We don't have that kind of vision, and especially not with the Nectarine Nero, who we have sitting in the White House right now. At some point, you and we have to decide what path we're going to take. November is that time. Anyway, if you've missed any of the first hour of the program, you can check it out at thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you're listening on a station that only picks up the first hour, feel free to head over to thericksmithshow.com. For everyone else, going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day the United States Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, abolishing slavery. President Abraham Lincoln had already issued the Emancipation Proclamation, but there was worry that the proclamation, an emergency wartime measure, would not stand up in the courts after the war had ended. The introduction of the amendment first occurred in 1864 as the Civil War raged on. That meant that only Northern legislators were present to debate the issue. Despite this, the amendment failed to pass the House of Representatives. Determined to ensure its passage on the second try, President Lincoln made the amendment part of the National Republican platform for the presidential election. He lobbied heavily for the bill and was able to win enough support for its passage. The New York Times described the scene after the vote in the House of Representatives, writing, "No attempt was made to suppress the applause, which came from all sides, everyone feeling that the occasion justified the fullest expression of approbation and joy." The final amendment read, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place, subject to their jurisdiction." The amendment then had to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. The ratification marked a fundamental change in the labor system of the United States. No more would the nation be divided by free labor and slave labor laws. Kentucky did not officially ratify the 13th Amendment until 1976, and Mississippi did not follow until 1995. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Lots going on, lots to talk about. The big State of the Union. Did you stay awake? Did you make it? I did not. And I'm not ashamed of that. Normally I stay engaged, but just the low energy, the really no interest in being lied to, just snoozed right off, got up and read it in the morning. Anyway, let's find out what's going on over at Raw Story. Top stories of the day, and also we'll find out what the thought on the big speech was. That's why I've asked Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter over at Raw Story. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Or can you hear me okay?
Yep. So what'd you think? Did you make it the whole night? Did you watch the whole thing?
So admittedly, I did not watch it because I too cannot stay up that late when I have to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning the next day. I watched it on Twitter with like one eye open, like half trying to fall asleep, but half glued to Twitter. So I got a feed of just people making fun of it. And that is a great way to fall asleep. I will tell you that. And then this morning I woke up, watched all the videos, read it a lot while I was watching the videos, then read all the fact checks. And it was just like a day full of following up with everything.
Yeah, I mean, I felt horrible, but I normally want to watch it. I want to get the atmosphere, and it was just, all the calls for unity, and then all of the divisive talk. I'm going, which way you going here? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we're going to all walk together and then beat me over the head with a stick.
Exactly. My favorite part of the whole speech, though, was whenever he said that he was extending an open hand. And I was like, dude, we all know where that hand has been.
Actually, I don't want to know. So do you buy in the Stormy Daniels thing?
Just the way that Melania has been acting, that makes me buy it.
Yeah, she sure did not look happy last night.
She was not happy. And the fact that she just ran off to Florida Right before his State of the Union address seemed a little strange. We've never really seen her do that before. She didn't stand up and clap whenever he started talking about family and faith. I heard somebody, it was Sunny Hostin on The View this morning, talked about how it seems like she's kind of trolling her husband in public. That it's this like subtle shade that she's kind of dropping. And, people were saying that that's what the white suit was about. That last time whenever he delivered a speech, all of the Democratic women wore white suits and wore white. And then Hillary Clinton wore a white suit whenever she delivered her address accepting the nomination for the Democratic Party. And so a lot of people were saying, well, is that a nod to her? But she was not happy. She did not look happy. She didn't look excited to be there. The only time she looked happy was whenever she walked in and everybody gave her a standing ovation. It kind of, just the way that her face looked, it sort of looked like she didn't expect for that to happen.
Right.
And
that she's more popular than he is.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, like, she's a woman scorned. Like, she is a woman who has been completely dragged all over the place, and she never wanted any of this. Like, she's a very private person, a really quiet, shy person, and I feel bad for her, man.
No, I do. I absolutely do. But, I saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders today saying that Nancy Pelosi needs to smile more, and I'm going, did you not look at Melania the whole night?
Right, exactly. And I mean, for that matter, all of the briefings that I've seen Sarah Huckabee Sanders at, it's a really sexist kind of trope to tell women to smile more. So I'm disappointed that Sarah Huckabee Sanders would buy into that.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, that's that kind of mansplaining thing, which kind of makes me wonder. It looks like she's got that mustache going on.
I feel like she is so out of touch with I think not just obviously Democratic women, but all women in general. She just seems so completely far away from the realities of what real women are talking about and what real women face. And like, nobody wants to hear somebody be like, come on, smile, including her.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's that right-wing evangelical upbringing. It's the Huckabee background.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And that family is so jacked up.
That's one way of putting it.
It's the polite way.
That's
the
what
I say,
FCC-friendly way.
Exactly. You like how I did that for you?
You did a very nice job. You're not going to get me fined and throw it off the air. Because look, you just every day she says something that makes me go, really? Do you? I have this vision of her waking up every morning, either reaching for a bottle of something or not grabbing a razor blade.
Well, I mean, whenever she said, I wish that Pelosi would smile more, I was like, my immediate thought was, God, I wish you would stop, lie less. That's what I wish. And I don't know how she gets up there and I don't know if she actually believes what she says. Is she really living in that much of an alternative universe, or does she just have no conscience?
No. I would go with the no conscience, because I think it's that
because we all know her father.
Exactly. It's that evangelical brainwashing, because look, at the end of the day, if she's as religious and as as God-fearing and a Christian and all of that stuff as Huckleberry claims and she claims, she would be nowhere near this guy.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's no way anybody with principles could be anywhere near him.
Yeah, I mean, how do you do that? How do you defend that? How do you get up every day and defend that?
I mean, you see Mike Pence doing it, and obviously he's completely sold his soul. So, all of that presumption that he was this principled conservative with these far right Christian values, we all know that that's crap. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I've said for a long time that I thought that the evangelical movement was all crap. And that now we're just now starting to see real Christians come forward and be like, no, this is not how this works, you guys. Like, you have to ask for forgiveness before you're given any sort of grace.
And you have to not do it again.
Yeah, like you have to want to change your behavior.
Exactly. I mean, I remember going to church because I grew up Catholic, and you would go to confession and you do your your Hail Marys and your Our Fathers and all that, and you'd be granted absolution if you really didn't do it again. That's how it went. But they just seem to think they can do it over and over and over again, and forgive
Splash me with some water and I'm washed clean. No,
Exactly.
that's not how that works. That's not how any of this works.
It's just crazy. But the thing is I know some evangelicals who are good, decent people. They want to do right. They want to live by the words and all that. I think it's the leadership who's full of it. I think they know they're in it for the money. They're in it for the power. And I think Pence is one of those people who knows you step on these people to get where you need to go.
Yeah. And to be honest, I was really surprised that we didn't see his hand on the back of Trump's neck, making his mouth move. Because it sure seems like that's what he's been doing pretty much this entire presidency.
Now, I understand his name is David Litt. He was one of Obama's speechwriters. Was railing against the State of the Union as I think it was, how'd you put it, a white nationalist wish list?
Yeah, and that is all Stephen Miller right there. Like when Stephen Miller is writing this stuff, like he's sort of like the Steve Bannon light, and not even that light, just maybe light on fat. But Stephen Miller is the one I feel like who's sliding in all of these offensive phrases and these little, nods to David Duke. And I mean, the worst line was the one that he said where it was like Americans are dreamers too. And it's like, oh, that's gross. Like, come on, dude. But that's white supremacy right there. Like David Duke loved that. And
I can't tell you how many people I've heard say that. And you look at Facebook and the people who have it, and I don't know if most people understand that that's dog whistle, that's hey, you're over here with us, or if they say, oh yeah, we're all dreamers, we all want a better future, and they're taking it a different way, or if they're all in on it.
I have to believe that people are not that stupid. I think people on the far right totally get it, and then they also understand the need to put on the polo shirts and the khakis and take off the white hoods and be respectable people, and that's part of hiding in plain sight that I feel like the white supremacists have gotten really good at doing, and maybe that's part of the dog whistles too, where they're phrasing things in such a way that it seems innocuous, but the reality is that it's just as bad as being flat out honest about your white supremacy.
Yeah, it's been years since I've seen him, but I had a black friend, back in the late 80s, I guess it was, who said that, he grew up in Georgia, in the 50s and 60s. He was an older gentleman. He said, I much preferred it back then to where you knew who the racists were, you knew who the people who hated you were. And I think we're kind of living that time right now where they feel emboldened to come out.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, I agree. Like the best thing is for all of these people to start hanging the Confederate flags on everything, because then at least we know who they are. We know who to stay away from. It's the scary thing whenever they put on the polo shirts and the khakis and hang out at Applebee's or whatever, and pretend like they're normal, everyday family people. That's where it starts to get scary, because they're hiding in plain sight, and you never know. You never know what could happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I wanted to ask you about the memo, because evidently Trump said, on a hot mic yesterday, it's 100% certain they're going to release the memo. Explain to me how it makes any sense that the Republicans would release their cherry-picked memo of Nunes's and then vote to block the Democrats from putting out a memo of, saying, okay, this is our rebuttal. Does it make any sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense, because that way Republicans can pretend like, theirs is the truth. If they can block out everybody else's, then they're going to own the narrative. The thing that's so incredibly stupid is, why do Democrats even care whether there's a vote about releasing their memo? Like, some junior staffer is going to be handed this memo by a member and be like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And that's going to find its way to, Axios or Politico or whatever. And then everybody's going to have it by noon the next day. So I mean, like all of this stuff is going to get leaked. You can't attack the FBI like this and then expect them to not do anything.
Yeah.
You know, like we've talked about this before. These people are not paid enough money to do this.
Good point. Or they just give it to Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, she's the one who leaked the transcripts of the Fusion GPS folks. She's got a history of it. Give it to her.
Yeah, totally. And who's going to screw with her? I mean, like, there's no way that she's going to get voted out of office. She's a little bit more of a conservative Democrat than I'm a fan of, but, you know, like, nobody's going to mess with her. She's an old broad, and you just don't mess with those kind of old broads.
What's interesting to me, though, is, you know, how, and what's scary on a certain level as well is that you've got Nunes, who I see as someone who's very amateurish, you know, someone who, you know, easily played by this administration, who is cherry picking this stuff. And I see this as just really dangerous kind of messaging for the rest of the world to look at us and go, are we this simple minded? Are we this easily led astray? Are we this able to be screwed with and not actually retaliate?
The thing that I wonder is if somebody has something on Nunes. I heard a pundit talk about that, and I had never considered that before. What is it that somebody has on him that is making him so willing to compromise any kind of loyalty to his party? You know, did Trump give him something? You know, is he getting something great and profitable and powerful or whatever out of this? And nobody really knows. Like, if we see him get a really cushiony, you know, committee assignment, or a chairmanship, or, you know, something in the administration, then we know. But
you know, I can't even go with that, because he's chairman of a very powerful committee already. I mean, you know, there's got to be some, you know, Russian golden showers tapes somewhere or something, because, you know, I don't know how you put your career on the line for this guy. I just don't get it.
The thing I really would like to see is more Democrats get up there and demand that he stake his reputation on this memo. I want him to say that he believes so strongly in this. He believes so strongly that he is right, that he's willing to agree to either step down, leave his seat, or just like completely leave politics if it turns out he's full of crap.
Well, I'm hoping he leaves politics altogether, and I'm hoping it's not by choice. I'm hoping in November they vote him the hell out, because look, the Intelligence Committee is one of those places where this kind of partisan wrangling really shouldn't happen. This is not, our national security is at risk. To burn sources, to denigrate sources, to destroy our intelligence, what little we may have, just seems really short-sighted and dumb. And what I'm really afraid of is that major event that Trump alluded to yesterday may be coming.
Yeah, and I remember all of these times that Republicans in the early 2000s were talking about, you know, how important security is, how important it is to defend the homeland. And now they are anything but. Like, they are not defending the homeland against another Russian intrusion into the 2018 election. They are
the
not.
Motherland.
Yeah,
defending the motherland.
They're defending the motherland of Russia. They're not standing up for the United States. They are not making us more secure, either here at home or on the internet, obviously. And it's, I mean, that is the thing that just really strikes me as strange, is that you have seen the Republican Party completely flip to be against all of these principles that they believed in for years. Like, my political career really started in like early 2000s. So that has been my real experience in politics, is seeing all of these like pro-military, pro-security Republicans, and all of a sudden now they're just like, meh.
Yeah. What happened to the country first thing?
Yeah.
I know they like to talk about it. So last question I've got for you then, you know, in looking at this, and you look at Nunes and you look at all the Republicans who are just walking in lockstep, is it possible they're all somewhat looking inward and going, uh-oh, we're all involved in this Russian thing? That, you know, the Russians, the oligarchs spent so much money and spread it around so thin that they're all in on it?
That's terrifying to think about. That's absolutely terrifying. Maybe it is. I mean, I never in a million years would have thought that we would have a president that had even the chance of being compromised by another country. So at this point, who knows? Anything is possible.
Going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and whether he fires Mueller or not, and what reaction. May we live in interesting times, most certainly interesting times.
Absolutely, but at least it pays my bills.
There you go. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.
Good stuff. You want to check out Sarah's work, fantastic work. Or you can go check it out yourself, rawstory.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day 7,000 teachers and staff at the Orleans Parish School District in New Orleans, Louisiana, were fired. The public schools were considered some of the worst in the country. The school district was also bankrupt. It was unable to account for $71 million in federal funds. After Hurricane Katrina, the school district lost nearly its entire tax base. The district canceled all pay and health insurance for its teachers and staff. Then, the state of Louisiana seized control of most of the city's 128 schools. A majority were either closed or turned over to charter school operators. The school district fired its remaining teachers and staff. It was a union-busting maneuver against the United Teachers of New Orleans. The union was an AFT affiliate. Organized in 1972, it was the first integrated education union in the South. Its membership overwhelmingly consisted of African American women. After the schools were turned over to the charters, they were replaced by inexperienced Teach for America workers. Many of these new teachers did not have any teacher certification. A class action lawsuit soon followed. In 2014, Louisiana's Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals found that teachers and staff were not given due process and had the right to be rehired as schools reopened after Katrina. The damages could amount to $1.5 billion. 10 years after Katrina, a New York Times article asked the question, was Hurricane Katrina the best thing ever to happen to the education system in New Orleans? As Education Secretary Arne Duncan once said, the answer has been a resounding no. In the years since, the union has fought successfully to organize many of the charter schools in New Orleans. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. So it appears that, well, we the people have power. Yesterday we talked about FEMA and their announcement to be pulling out of Puerto Rico. Cut and run. 4 months after the hurricane, they were heading for the exits. Well, enough people complained, enough people got on the phones, enough people screamed, hollered, complained that, well, not going to happen. Evidently, they're not going to officially shut off the food and water mission in Puerto Rico. They're not going to just say, here you go, and cut and run. They're going to stay. It's not known how long they're going to stay. It's not known how much they're going to do, but they're not leaving just yet. And look, you had a lot of people who were saying, who I got a bunch of emails from folks going, this is ridiculous. How can they do that? Again, look who's leading the country. I mean, it just is what it is. Also, an interesting story coming out today. Ben Carson, head of the Housing and Urban Development section of HUD, evidently he, like the Donald, again, taking marching orders from the top. Evidently, Ben Carson doing a little bit of, filling the son's pockets, filling the daughter-in-law's pockets. Evidently, they were doing an event in Baltimore back in June. And the lawyer for the department said, hey, you can't do this. This is wrong. Don't do it. You can't use our agency for public gain. Turns out they were bringing people who they had business dealings with to HUD events to rub elbows and to do other things in hopes of showing their influence or whatever. I got to wonder, across our government, how much of this stuff is going on? How much of our tax dollars are being wasted, and how many, business opportunities are we seeing the entrepreneurs who Trump has put into place? How much are they lifting? I listen to people scream and holler and complain about waste, fraud, and abuse. This to me just looks like out and out graft and theft. I mean, at some point, do we get it? Focus on the shiny thing. I don't know. I look at this stuff and it just absolutely blows my mind that more people aren't upset. Where are the Tea Party people now? I haven't seen a Tea Party flag, and I can't tell you how long. In fact, there were a couple people in my neighborhood. I only see one left. Where'd they go? Where are the people who are going to say, hey, we're going to hold these folks accountable? Don't tread on me. Where are they now? You look at that tax plan. Where are they? You look at that speech last night. Where are they? Did not mention steel in an actual steel concept once. It was a steel the spine comment. Did not talk about that at all. And yet there's a 232 case sitting on his desk right now that he could sign to help the American steel industry. Chooses not to. And you got to wonder, where are these don't tread on me people? Where are the taxed enough already people, especially that we know in the next decade their taxes are going to go up? Where are they? Kind of makes you wonder, was it real, or was it something that, the Koch brothers and the wealth class, that they helped push along? Angering, frustrating, all of that stuff. Anyway, here in Pennsylvania, next Tuesday, the big state of the state budget address Tom Wolf's going to be giving. When we come back, I'm going to talk about, what's going to be in the budget address? What should we be pushing for? This is a big election year, and I've been saying for a while, if Tom Wolf does not win in November, Pennsylvania is Mississippi or Alabama within minutes. This is a huge election. And look, 2018, huge election no matter where you live. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Mark Steer is going to be here from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center to share his thoughts on what might be in the budget, what's he's hoping in the budget, and maybe what we do to help push it along. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Do you believe in climate change?
Debunking President Trump's latest lies and disinformation on climate science.
The United States is not just exporting energy, we're exporting freedom.
The U.S. is now importing less oil than ever before, thanks to Obama. EPA reversal on Pebble Mine is qualified good news for Alaska. Plus,
while the main impetus for this year's forward movement of the clock was the perilous nuclear situation, climate change very much remains a serious and worsening threat.
Thanks to Trump, the doomsday clock has now been moved up to 2 minutes to midnight.
Thanks, Trump. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There is a cooling and there's a heating.
Oh, Jesus, God in heaven. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the President of the United States, went on British TV and made a complete jackass out of himself and these United States.
Yes, he did. In a semi-coherent interview on Sunday with Piers Morgan for Britain's ITV, Trump exposed his complete ignorance of climate science and U.S. climate policies. You could see his mind reaching to remember what he's been told by Fox News as he lied about how the term climate change was coined, lied about the melting ice caps, and exposed his ignorance on science, which would be comical if it weren't so dangerous.
Do you believe in climate change? Do you think it exists?
There is a cooling and there's a heating. I mean, look, it used to not be climate change. It used to be global warming, right? The ice caps were going to melt. They were going to be gone by now, but now they're setting records, okay? They're at a record level.
Okay, so the ice caps are setting records, but it's for melting. According to NASA, sea ice at both poles hit record lows last year. That's both the Arctic and the Antarctic. And it's been called climate change for more than a century.
You mean they didn't just come up with that because global warming was no longer working?
No, certainly not. And NASA, just over a week ago, announced that 2017 was the second hottest year ever recorded. So no, the nonstop upward temperature trend for the planet that has been going on for decades continues.
Well, who listens to him? He's only the president of the United States.
And I just want to note for the record that corporate media needs to stop fixating on whether Republican politicians believe in climate change, and they need to start asking what they plan to do about it.
Good point.
Meanwhile, some good news for Alaskans. In a surprise reversal late Friday, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency announced that it will restore Obama-era restrictions blocking the controversial proposed Pebble Mine.
What?
A massive copper and gold mine that the Obama EPA had determined would irreparably harm the pristine Bristol Bay watershed, home to the world's largest salmon fishery. However, Think Progress reports that EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt did not outright ban the proposed mine. Instead, Pruitt's statement says, quote, "The decision neither deters nor derails the application process of the Pebble Partners proposed project."
So here we're trying to give some credit for something to Scott Pruitt at the EPA. We can't even do that, huh?
Unfortunately, no. Alaska, however, may get an exemption from the Trump administration's plan to expand offshore drilling. That's because the state's Republican senators and Republican House representative have asked Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke to remove much of Alaska's waters from the offshore expansion, similar to how Florida's Republican Governor Rick Scott asked for Florida to be excused.
Funny how that happens.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is importing less oil than ever before. Net imports of crude oil products into the United States has dropped to the lowest level on record since 1973. And according to U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry at the World Economic Forum in Davos,
we are now the #1 oil and gas producing nation on the face of the earth.
That's thanks to the surge in domestic shale oil production begun under the Obama administration. The Trump administration is pushing the world now to use more oil and export even more of our climate disaster to the world, directly contradictory to climate scientists' warnings that we must get to net zero carbon emissions as soon as possible to avoid catastrophic impacts.
Well,
there is a cooling and there's a heating.
Which brings us to the doomsday clock, the iconic symbol that represents the likelihood of man-made global catastrophe, which last week the scientists at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved up to 2 minutes to midnight for the first time since 1953. In doing so, the Bulletin scientists condemned not only President Trump's aggressive rhetoric on nuclear weapons and North Korea, but climate scientist Sivan Kartha, a member of the Bulletin's board, also put the blame squarely on Donald Trump's rollback of U.S. climate policies.
And of course, he also formally declared his intention to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. In other words, the U.S. president has done his best to follow through on his stated intention of derailing U.S. climate action.
Promises made, promises kept. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
After midnight, we're gonna let it all hang down. After midnight, we're gonna chug a love and shout.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
So next Tuesday, the budget address here in Pennsylvania. And look, at the end of the day, so much needs to be done in this state. So much needs to be done across the country. I mean, I looked at last night's State of the Union address, and there almost nothing in there I think is going to move us in the right direction. So as I look ahead to next Tuesday, with a very divided government here in Pennsylvania, I don't know that I have a lot of hope for the future, but here to talk about what could be in the budget address, what we need to be doing, and what we would like to see in the address, I've asked Mark Steer to come talk with us. He's the director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure, Rick. How are you tonight?
So what are we hoping for? Next Tuesday, obviously, the big speech. What are we hoping the governor comes out with?
Well, can I tell you what my ideal would be? Then we'll talk about what the reality might be. My ideal is that we have a governor who's a real pragmatic, problem-solving person like Tom Wolf. In that way, he's not that much different from Ed Rendell or from Tom Ridge or Bob Casey or Dick Thornburgh. I imagine in my ideal him looking at a General Assembly filled with Democrats and Republicans who, whatever their differences, are united in trying to solve Pennsylvania's problems. To that audience, I think a Governor Wolf would propose a bold plan in a number of areas. He proposed something like the Pennsylvania Promise Plan to make college education far more affordable, which our organization came out with in the last 2 weeks, a commitment to reducing inequality in our school funding, new funding for treatment of opioid abuse, an increase in the minimum wage, and a plan to balance Pennsylvania's budget with revenues falling on the richest Pennsylvanians. And you get Republicans and Democrats disagreeing about some things, but basically saying, hey, that's the direction we need to go in because those are the problems we all recognize. They fight a little bit about who would pay the taxes and how much spending there would be. They'd come to some agreement.
You would hope. You would hope.
Right.
I mean, the sad reality is I look at the Republicans seeing this as an election year, seeing this as an opportunity to put a black eye on this governor. While I would love to see all this stuff happen, how realistic?
The problem is when the governor looks out at the audience, what he'll see is many Republicans, including the leadership of the House, are not problem solvers but ideologues. There are a lot of Republicans who are still problem solvers, but he's facing a Pennsylvania House of Representatives led by right-wing extremists who would not raise taxes to solve cancer, let alone to balance the budget, who are not interested in spending more money on education or higher education, who instead want to cut back on the services we already provide to people who need Medicaid and other important human services. In the face of that kind of audience, I expect Governor Wolf is going to be pragmatic and going to, push the envelope a little bit on the minimum wage and funding for opioid abuse. But I don't think he's going to be that bold this week because I think he understands that with this kind of divided government, there's just not much he's going to be able to do. He's going to be spending a lot of time stopping the bad stuff the Republicans are going to propose.
Right. And also, you just don't have the revenue for it. I mean, while I would love the idea that you guys have come out with on taxing capital gains and going after the 1% of the 1%, as you've pointed out, you've got a Republican Party in this state, ideologically and pledge-driven to never raise taxes, even if they're on fire, and raising taxes would be the only way to put it out.
That's right. And in some ways, the budget is on fire. We know the last couple of years, we've balanced the budget with borrowing and one-shot revenues. We're hearing the governor's going to propose a no taxes budget. I think he's going to find a way to get us through this year without the need for a lot of financial finagling and certainly without a need for taxes. But what that means is we're leaving all the big problems unresolved. And that means they're going to have to be resolved by the people of Pennsylvania in next November. They're going to have to decide what kind of government do we want. Do we want a pragmatic, problem-solving government, or do we want a government run by right-wing ideologues? And I think that's the choice facing Pennsylvanians right now. And, the governor can't make that happen one way or the other. The House Republicans can't make that choice. It's ultimately going to be up to the people, because we have a starkly divided government, as I think we've seen in Pennsylvania since the Civil War.
Yeah, but I don't know. You know, we've always had something of a divided government, but has it been this bad? I mean, it just seems that you can get nothing done anymore. I mean, and I don't know if it's that, you know, we've already divided up in camps and we're never allowed to talk to each other, or if it's, you know, honestly and truthfully, the wealthy own our system, and it's just never going to work for us. I'm still trying to figure out, you know, how do we get here?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers to that question. One is gerrymandering, which has made defeating a lot of incumbents impossible, which means that the Republicans, particularly in the House where they have very small districts, are much more afraid of being primaried by people even more extreme than they are afraid of losing a general election. I think it's the ideological tenor of the Republican Party, which is driven largely by the funders, by the very richest people who contribute most of the money that they run on. And it's by a self-fulfilling prophecy among them. They think they can radically change the world. If they ever had a chance to do that, I think they'd find out that the voters would say no and get out of here, because voters do not want radical cutbacks in education and even more tax cuts for the very wealthy. In fact, when we had a governor who tried to do that, Tom Corbett. He was the only governor ever in this state who was defeated for re-election.
No.
And so we know that people don't want that, but what people haven't said is they want to go back to the old days when Democrats and Republicans could more or less come together and actually govern the state and solve the problems that we have.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that goes, I don't know how you get back to the point to where things get done. I don't know if, you know, I look at, like, someone told me that C-SPAN was the beginning of all of it. When everything became hyper transparent, that's when people, you know, had to always play for the camera and always had to play to the base, where they could never get anything done. I don't know, but at some point, if it's going back to getting them drinking or whatever, maybe we need to be moving down those roads.
Well, no, every once in a while they can find something they agree on, like medical marijuana, where the common sense of that was so great that even in this case, Speaker Turzai, is the right-wing extremist who runs the House, opposed it, but his members said, no, forget it. You know, we're not following you down this road because people are suffering and medical marijuana will relieve suffering. Every once in a while you can get something like that happening. The governor's had some victories in getting some more funding for education, for medical marijuana, for a pension bill that no one really liked, but at least there was a compromise on it. But a lot of the really big issues, the things that are standing in the way of this state moving forward, like really investing in education and higher education and dealing with our long-term budget problems, they're just almost impossible right now.
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing for all of us.
I'm with you, but you said ultimately it's going to be up to the voters come November. And as you pointed out, and others have said, Pennsylvania is one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. And I look at today, you had the Senate President pro tempore, Joseph Scarnati, informing the state Supreme Court they're not redrawing the maps.
Well, if they're not going to redraw the map, then the Supreme Court is going to redraw the map. You know, they're really hoping that they can get away with the Supreme Court of the United States overturning that decision. And that's possible. We have a highly political court in the United States, and they might say that Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision. I'm not a lawyer, but I did used to teach constitutional law, and it strikes me that making that decision would be, a pretty radical one for the United States Supreme Court. But they might do it.
Well, I mean, if you look at what happened in North Carolina, isn't it kind of almost similar?
No. In fact, it's actually very different because the decision that called for changing the congressional districts in North Carolina was a decision made in federal court, and it's quite common for federal court decisions to be appealed up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that given that they're going to decide a gerrymandering case or two, actually, under the United States Constitution, then that decision of the lower court in North Carolina should be stayed. The Pennsylvania decision is based on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Constitution rather, which means that the final arbiter about what's constitutional or not, according to the Pennsylvania Constitution, is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
That's right.
It's very, very rare for the United States Supreme Court to interfere with a state's highest court analysis of what its own constitution requires.
That's
So
right.
it would really be a very unusual step for the court to intervene.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, you had John Roberts who said I'm going to be the guy who calls balls and strikes, and yet they've undone decades of decided law. And you look at Citizens United, you look at some of that stuff, you look at what's coming up with this Janus case, potentially overturning decades of decided law. Nothing surprises me. Nothing would surprise me when it comes to this court.
I agree. Nothing would surprise me. But I read the brief of the people who are appealing the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, and it's almost self-refuting. I mean, the argument is really focused. I'm not going to bore everyone with all the details, and it would really be an extraordinary break with the whole federal structure where the states have states' rights and states their own constitutions, their ability to make their own laws under those constitutions. It would be such an extraordinary thing that I'm not saying it can't happen, but it would be a very sad thing. And it would be incredibly hypocritical. Republicans, for years and years and years, have said they favor state rights, and now they're asking the United States Supreme Court to overturn a decision by the highest court in Pennsylvania based on the Pennsylvania Constitution. What happened to states' rights?
Yeah, that's convenient when it works for us, Mark, not for you. You know how that is. So let me last line of questioning I've got, because I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping the governor comes with a very pragmatic view. It is an election year, and I'm hoping that the budget gets passed and we get all the things that we need to get done. Do you think we're going to see another protracted budget battle? Do you see this as you look into the future? Do you see this kind of just going through, and then the big fight being the year after?
That's what most people are saying that I'm talking to, that there really is an inclination to fight about the budget, that people want to get onto the election. They understand that neither side can really accomplish what it wants. The Republicans are going to pass a lot of bad legislation, to my mind. The governor's going to veto it. The vetoes are not going to be overridden. I think both sides understand governing is almost impossible. It's time to ask the voters to decide which direction for the state. So I think that's what will happen, but who knows?
Again,
it's a weird state sometimes.
That's why November is so important. I hope everyone's registered. I hope everyone has it marked on their calendar. Wrap a string around the finger to remember. Election day this November is that important, not just on the federal level, but also on the state and local level. Mark, I appreciate the time filling us in on the details and give us some thoughts. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Rick. Anytime.
Always a good talking to Mark Steer, Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. You want to check out their website? We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people.
Think of all the roads. Think of all the crossings. Taking steps is easy. Standing still is hard. Remember all their faces. Remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day the United States Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, abolishing slavery. President Abraham Lincoln had already issued the Emancipation Proclamation, but there was worry that the proclamation, an emergency wartime measure, would not stand up in the courts after the war had ended. The introduction of the amendment first occurred in 1864 as the Civil War raged on. That meant that only Northern legislators were present to debate the issue. Despite this, the amendment failed to pass the House of Representatives. Determined to ensure its passage on the second try, President Lincoln made the amendment part of the National Republican platform for the presidential election. He lobbied heavily for the bill and was able to win enough support for its passage. The New York Times described the scene after the vote in the House of Representatives, writing, "No attempt was made to suppress the applause, which came from all sides. Everyone feeling that the occasion justified the fullest expression of approbation and joy." The final amendment read, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place, subject to their jurisdiction." The amendment then had to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. The ratification marked a fundamental change in the labor system of the United States. No more would the nation be divided by free labor and slave labor laws. Kentucky did not officially ratify the 13th Amendment until 1976, and Mississippi did not follow until 1995. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. While most Americans weighed in on President Trump's State of the Union address as it happened, the world is now having its say. A top official in the Japanese cabinet said Wednesday the island nation appreciated Trump's strong words directed to North Korea, including the following lines.
North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear missiles could very soon threaten our homeland. We are waging a campaign of maximum pressure to prevent that from ever happening.
China had a very different take on Trump's remarks. A foreign ministry spokesperson condemned Trump's Cold War mentality when it came to global crises and his zero-sum ideology on issues such as trade. In his remarks, Trump described China as a rival that challenges American interests, the American economy, and values, and he seemed to threaten further tariffs against China for stealing American intellectual property.
The era of economic surrender is totally over. We will protect American workers and American intellectual property through strong enforcement of our trade rules.
And a new United Nations report has identified 22 American companies doing business in illegal Israeli settlements in the Palestinian West Bank. Those companies have yet to be named until the UN can contact each one individually, but that hasn't stopped the Israeli government from slamming the report. Israel's UN ambassador said Wednesday it was shameful the blacklist was published on the same day the UN is officially commemorating Holocaust remembrance. The UN Human Rights Council is tasked with documenting business activity in what's known as the occupied Palestinian territories. A total of 206 companies, the vast majority of them Israeli, met those criteria in this year's review. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascists or bound to lose?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of John Kasich. I've never been. In fact, I go back, to when he was in Congress. He was one of the extreme. He was the fringe at the time. And what's interesting to me is, having done this for as long as I've done it, I look at people who, just 10 years ago, just 15 years ago, were the radicals of the time, pushing a very radical agenda for the time. They are now the mainstream moderates, if you will, who are looking at the crazies and going, you're crazy now. It's kind of interesting to me. But evidently, according to the Columbus Dispatch, Kasich went after the GOP, who have been attacking the FBI and the Justice Department. And I guess, compared the attacks on those agencies and on the press to actions of bullies and autocrats. I got to be honest, that's big language. According to the Dispatch, he said the first thing that happens when people want to be bullies and they're autocrats or whatever, it's that they go to restrict the press. So do all the complaining you want, but thank God we have the press, he said. He said, to me, it's just one of those essential things that we have in our country that is so important for the fabric of who we are as Americans. And understand, you have to have a free and open press by Constitution. It's the only profession in this country with a guarantee in the Constitution. And yet you look at what Trump's done, and done masterfully. May I add, along with the entire echo chamber and all of the network that's been built up around this moment. We are now living the dream of, Lewis Powell and the robber barons of the late 60s, early 70s. This is the goal. This is what all of those years of building think tanks and state policy networks and buying professors and buying authors and basically taking over all of AM radio and owning television, all of this investment that the wealth class of this country has made to create what I would argue is an incredibly powerful and dangerous echo chamber is now coming to a head. They can now, with just a couple of words, get out their message to millions of people and have it regurgitated. I said for years, one of the masterful things that the right wing did, and it was Rush Limbaugh and that whole push, was to create this concept of ditto heads. People who absolutely agree with you, agree with everything you say. I remember it happening right before my eyes. I remember my union brothers and sisters, coming into the lunchroom and, all of them on the same page arguing, that we'd make more money if there was no union here. And I would go, where is that possible? Show me where that happens. And they would argue, and they were all on the same playbook, and they all, mega dittos, Rush. And you go, masterful brainwashing. And to have it constantly reinforced morning after afternoon after night, day after day, week after week, month after month, year, decade after decade, it's there. And it's amazing to me now that I hear people who they've taken the fake news thing. Everything's fake news. We believe nothing anymore. There's no truth. There's no justice. There's nothing. And for an autocratic personality, for someone like Trump, that has got to be manna from heaven. That has got to be the cat's meow, the sliced bread, all of that in one big basket. Because that means that these people are looking at him going, you're it. So during the campaign, when he was saying, I alone, me, I'm the only one who can fix this, you've got all these people going, yep, mega dittos, done. Scary stuff. And yet, I look at someone like Kasich, and good on him, man. I understand this is him setting up a 2020 presidential run. Understand that. But good on him for coming out and speaking out and being one of the sole lone voices of the Republican Party on some bit of sanity. And the hope is that more of, and as I've said this before, Republicans, take your party back somewhere just, I'm not even talking about north of the sane line, just somewhere near it. Just somewhere near it. Because you can't look at what's coming out of the White House right now. You can't look at what's coming out of Nunes's committee. You can't look at what's going on and say this is right, this is normal, and this is helpful. Dangerous times. That's why we have to be involved. We have to be active, educated, engaged, all of that. And you have to tune in every weeknight, 9 to 11 right here. If you missed any of tonight's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being there. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.